Hello, everybody. We're going to wait for people to start filtering in. Takes just a second for everybody to start moving in here from the waiting room. All right, everybody, let's get started. Welcome to our session 3 of our dispute resolution series. Um, Family Matters is one of the two parent training and information centers that serves the state of Illinois. Your Parent Center is a portion of IDEA that ensures that your student and the caregivers related to that student understand what their role in special education is. So we work with families, infants, toddlers, children, young youth, anywhere between the ages of 0 to 26 to help, like I said, understand their role in special education. Please remember that Family Matters is unable to offer CEUs for training participants. Certificates of attendance can be requested by contacting the trainer via email, so you can send me an email after the presentation. Family Matters is not a legal service and cannot provide legal advice or legal representation in any way. Information received from Family Matters is not intended for any legal service and should not be used for substitution for legal advice. We are funded partly from the U.S. Department of Education. However, the contents of this presentation should not be viewed as the policies of the U.S. Department of Education, and you should not assume endorsement from the federal government. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be available on the Family Matters website following the presentation, probably Monday. Please use the chat box to state your name, title, and organization. So if you are John Doe and you are a parent, that's what you would put. If you're Amy Smith from DSCC, that's what you'd put in our chat box, please. Please use the question and answer box for questions. We will address all these questions at the end of today's presentation. Also, please help us by completing the brief survey you will receive following the presentation, and a copy of the presentation slides and handouts were emailed to you yesterday, but I have also put them in the chat box, so it's a link to the Google Drive. Family Matters is first and foremost an educational helpline. We take phone calls all day long for family members, caregivers, self-advocates, students, professionals who want to understand their role in special education better. We also hold the state's educational surrogate parent program training portion along with ISB. So we help train volunteers in our state to become educational surrogates for students who are within the care of DCFS. Once a year, starting usually in January, we host our Compass series. Compass stands for Coaching Others and Mentoring Parents About School Services. It's a way you can learn how to advocate effectively for your student's education plan. Carrie just completed this year's DAISY data collection program. It's a way you can understand how data has a vital role in the special education process. We do lots of special education advocacy trainings like this one. We are very fortunate to have two young self advocates that do a vlog for us monthly, and you can find more information about both of those individuals on our website. We also put out a quarterly newsletter and transition related newsletter along with our monthly podcast. This is me. I'm Abby Mars. I am an educational support coach here at Family Matters. My counterpart, Carrie Potter, is also an educational support coach here at Family Matters, and we help you, hopefully, to understand your role in special education. So with that, I'm going to turn over the sharing capabilities to Emily. I wanted to say thank you so much for joining us for part 4 of our dispute resolution series and understanding more about dispute resolution. So we will get started. Emily from ISB is here today. We're super excited, and I apologize, Emily, I don't know how to say your last name.
Oh,
So
that's okay. Yeah, it's Emily Postelmans, um, and I am the Mediation and IEP Facilitation Coordinator at ISB. Um, I started off here at Illinois State Board of Education as a um, state special education state complaint investigator, and then probably about a year and a half ago moved into this position. So I will go ahead and can everybody see my screen? Because I'm not sure what I'm doing, but for some reason I I can't see myself, but I can see
yeah,
my screen.
all I can see is you. So let's
Okay. Okay.
see.
So let me see what I'm doing wrong.
Let me make sure that it's not on my end.
Okay.
You
Let's
have co-host,
see.
so you should be able to share your screen.
Okay. And I did. I'm going to just end it and start it over and
Okay.
see if that makes a difference. I might have done it too fast. So let's see. Go back. Okay. Let's try this again.
There we go.
Can you see that?
I
All
can
right.
see it now.
Excellent.
Yep.
Excellent. Okay. So here it is. So Emily Postelman's Mediation and IEP Facilitation Coordinator. Let's go ahead and get started. So, first of all, I had to throw this slide up here because I feel like, well, my past experience in the school setting was as a speech language pathologist. So I worked in public schools for, well, public and private schools for about 20 years as a speech pathologist. And I have attended many, many IEP meetings. And there have been times where I felt like we might have almost been in this type of situation. So I thought this little cartoon was fitting for what we're here to talk about today, which is the IEP facilitation and mediation, which are two of our dispute resolution options that ISB offers. So nice little food fight on a Friday afternoon. Um, but really, so our dispute resolution options, I know I mentioned that these are two of them. We do have four dispute resolution options. So I just wanted to share this comparison chart that we do have on the ISB website on our dispute resolution page, on the main page of dispute resolution. The nice thing I think that this document does is it really does kind of separate the differences between the dispute resolution options. So for instance, I often get a lot of calls about what's the difference with IEP facilitation and mediation, because oftentimes people think that, well, either has a facilitator that's there, and that's true. But the IEP facilitation process is really just an IEP meeting. So, that could be an annual review. It could be just a meeting that the parent or district has requested to discuss the student's levels of performance, or maybe there's needing to be a change in the program. Whatever the reason for the IEP meeting, you can always have a facilitator come attend the meeting. And the nice thing about that is this person is not there to be part of the team. They're they're just strictly there to be a facilitator and help ensure that each participant on the IEP team has uh, time to really express concerns, add input, and making sure that everyone is considering all all input that's being offered. So oftentimes a facilitator um, may may help in if there happens to be some difficult situations or some difficult decisions that might need to be made at an IEP meeting. A facilitator may help in the aspect of being able to be there to really help the team discuss the options, and then for the team to come together with a consensus of what needs to happen next. So, and that really differs from what mediation looks like. And I'll go into mediation a little bit later, but right now I'm going to focus more on IEP facilitation. So there's two slides here that have the comparison chart information. I included this because I thought it would be a nice resource for anyone to have. And there are these links to the request forms built into the comparison chart, which makes it nice and easy for parents or districts to utilize. Okay, oops. I'm going to go on. This is our second page of it. So IEP facilitation, oftentimes when we think of IEP facilitation, we're like, gosh, it sounds great, but how does it really work? Well, the nice thing is that it's one of those processes where you're really not just having someone coming in to facilitate a meeting. You're actually having someone coming in and helping provide a strategic vision. Like you're actually coming together as an IEP team and developing this strategic vision that you have for the student. Now, of course, an IEP meeting is individualized. It's an individualized education program for the student. So the focus needs to be on the student and it needs to be individualized. And in this process, you're, developing an action plan. You're, making sure that all the stakeholders are involved and engaged in this process. And it's also leadership building, not just for the district staff, but also for parents to be able to take a leadership role in help developing their students' IEP. So, what is a facilitated IEP meeting? What I liked about this is I thought this gave a nice visual to really understand the components of IEP meetings and how this works and why facilitation can be so important to that process. With facilitation, it really stresses the shared responsibility and shared understanding. So you basically have, your main wheel, so to speak, and you have the smaller wheels traveling around. And so within that, the shared responsibility and shared understanding are the big concepts that you really want to take from participating in this IEP facilitation because in the end, it is supposed to be a shared approach. And, both districts and parents should have that shared responsibility and shared understanding of what is being expected um, and what the proposal is for the future. Um, so I kind of went over already that the IEP is developed by a collaboration of team members. Um, with that, when I'm sorry, I'm going to move my screen here because I'm okay. There we go. With that, the process really enables everyone to focus on the IEP content and processes of the student. Oftentimes in IEP meetings, it's a very high stressful time for families. It's also can be stressful for school staff as well. And this really allows everyone to put the focus on the student and put the focus on IEP content and let everything else kind of vanish into the background because really the reason you're there, the reason there is IEP meetings is to develop a plan, a program for that student. By having the facilitator, that does help increase the efficiency of the time that's needed to create that document, and it also helps increase effective communication. So here are a list of benefits of IEP facilitation. So, like I said before, it really does help build and improve relationships among the IEP team members, and that might even be across disciplines. So often I know we think of it as parents and district and kind of thinking them as two different teams, but really, it's all one team, and oftentimes even the school staff, they have a lot. A lot of times there's a wide variation of school staff that participate in an IEP meeting, and they may have differences of opinion as well. So, bringing IEP facilitation into the IEP meetings does help build those relationships with everyone on the team. It keeps the meeting child focused. It encourages parents and professionals to consider new options and maybe even find out some issues that didn't even know that they existed, or there could be some unresolved problems that everyone's kind of been afraid to speak of, or at least someone has been afraid to bring up. It's a perfect time to bring up a difficult conversation when you have a facilitator there to help you. It provides opportunities for the IEP team to resolve conflicts. a lot of times problem solving, I know I've sat in many IEP meetings where most of the team thinks that things are going to go one way. But as everyone starts talking and discussing different, you know, present levels of performance and talking about student needs in different environments, all of a sudden, other ideas start to come of that. And then you have a nice actual brainstorming session where you're able to resolve a lot of issues that you may not have even known were there before you started. Um, Communication skills get improved over time, and by having this facilitator attend meetings, you're able to improve your communication skills and keep the team focused on why you're there. I know it's easy to get off topic. Many times you might come to a meeting and there's something that occurred the day before, and it's something you really want to address in that meeting, but at the moment in time, you're there to discuss the IEP, and whatever that issue is something that could be discussed at a different time. So the facilitator is there to keep that discussion focused. Um, Also, you're going to be keeping the decision making within team members who know the student best. You know, we have other dispute resolution options out there, and one being a special education state complaint and another being due process. However, when you go to those specific options, you no longer are including the IEP team or even people who know the student to determine the outcome. So now you're putting your trust in an outside person, a complaint investigator, or a hearing officer to determine what the outcome is going to be for that student. So by having IEP facilitation, you're able to still include the people who know the student best when making these decisions. And lastly, it develops a greater capacity of teams as they learn from facilitators how to conduct meetings successfully. I know that over time we've seen an increase of the use of IEP facilitation. And actually, just today I had an email from a large district that was saying that they were just so thrilled at some of their district administrators were really so excited to have IEP facilitation available to them because they were learning so much from just participating in meetings with a facilitator. And they felt that once they had that meeting, they were better prepared for the next meeting, which is great. I mean, that's what we want to hear. So it's very exciting. Now, I'm sure many of you have sat in those meetings that last hours, and no one is we're not getting anywhere. You know, this person wants one thing and somebody else wants something else, and we're just not getting anywhere with that meeting. I found this online, and I thought this really fit perfect for when you get into those standstills in an IEP meeting or maybe even a mediation. So here, the mediator uses his last remaining negotiating tool in an effort to break the stalemate: rock, paper, scissors. Let's hope that doesn't happen anywhere, but I could see how it could. So now we're going to get into mediation. And I found this word cloud that I thought really represented mediation quite well. And the word that really, or there's two words that really popped into view for me, and that was dispute and negotiation. So mediation is always available to anyone who has a dispute, that's special education related. It is a voluntary process, which I'm sorry, I forgot to mention earlier about IEP facilitation. Both of these processes are voluntary. And what that means is that both the parent and the district have to agree to participate. If one party declines, then this won't be an option. So that is one important fact that to keep in mind. But Anyway, with mediation, I do see dispute and negotiation as the two key words, because oftentimes mediation, it really just comes down to negotiation. And the mediator that gets assigned is there to help the parties negotiate to find some kind of common ground. And again, this needs to be student focused. This needs to be, you're there for whatever reason. If it's placement, a disagreement in placement, could be a disagreement in the amount of service, or maybe there was lack of service provided, and you disagree with the amount of compensatory service that the district has offered. There's many reasons that you could go to mediation, but in the end, you're really there. The mediator's there to help you negotiate, to help both parties negotiate. The mediator is impartial. They are not there to provide advice, but they're there to help guide the conversations. Oftentimes, with mediation, you might be put into two separate groups, and the mediator may go back and forth between the two groups. And then, when the mediator believes that you're starting to show signs of reaching some common ground, then you'll come together and hopefully create or write an agreement that you both end up signing. Once that agreement is signed, it is legal binding, which means if the district doesn't follow the agreement, then it can be upheld in the court of law. So let's go on here. So I might have covered a lot of this, but we'll go through and see what I didn't cover. So with mediation, it cannot be used to deny, delay, or delay a due process hearing request. So that is something that I hope isn't done often, but I could see how it may be utilized. So we really don't want to abuse the mediation process, because mediation is really there when both parties are wanting to come to some type of solution. They want to have resolution in the issues. It's not a good idea to agree to mediation if you know you're not going to bend. You know that you're not going to give any leadway. Then mediation probably isn't the best option. At the beginning of mediation session, the mediator will remind the parties that all discussions that occur during mediation must be confidential and must not be used as evidence for due process hearing or civil proceedings. There are no recordings allowed, video or audio recordings during a mediation session, and a mediator cannot be someone that goes to a due process hearing on behalf of either side. Um, Parties may terminate mediation at any time, and that can even occur before you've actually sat at the table. So if for some reason um, you've decided you don't want to participate after all, um, you can always terminate um, uh, that option to participate. So the mediator, they're impartial. They have been trained in mediation strategies and techniques. They are knowledgeable about special education laws and regulations. Um, they do not have authority to enforce or override any action by either party. The mediator will chair all mediation sessions to assure that they are convened in a timely fashion and held in a location convenient to the parties. Now, recently, well, since COVID, we have been conducting mediations virtually and in person. In the past, prior to COVID, mediations were only done in person. However, when COVID occurred, when that happened, um, mediations were still needed, and so they started conducting those virtually. A lot of people have become comfortable with doing virtual mediations, and it's been convenient many times for families that have other children at home or have some crazy schedules. So we do still allow virtual mediations as well as in person mediations. Um, let's see. As far as participants in mediation, typically you're not going to have, your whole IEP team available at this mediation. Mediation will typically include someone from the district who has legal authority to make decisions. And then, so that could be the superintendent, the director of special education. Sometimes they'll have, well, many times they will also have their legal counsel present. They don't have to. That's just sometimes the district chooses to do that. For families, they typically will have, the parents will be there, and then oftentimes they may have an advocate or legal counsel or someone else that they feel would be beneficial to have with them. Typically, a mediation would have around 5 to 6 people attend. It's not a real big group. I'm sure there have been bigger groups, but typically it's around 5 or 6 people. So with the mediation agreement, there are no notes that are taken during that meeting, during your mediation. The only record that is kept is if an agreement is made. So if an agreement is made, that becomes signed and it's a legal binding agreement. And that is something that we do keep on file. But if there is no agreement, then the only documentation we have is that no agreement was made. Now, stay put. This is a question I often get about stay put and mediation. So, the way the stay put provision works is if there happens to be a disagreement in placement, let's say you have an IEP meeting and the district has decided on one placement and then you've decided on a different placement. Neither party really has come to an agreement. Um, the the parent would have 10 days to uh, request mediation. And what that'll do is that will automatically then um, invoke the stay put provision, which means the student then would be placed in the most recent agreed upon placement until a decision is made. Now, a district can decline mediation. And so if they do, at that point, then from the day that they decline mediation, the parent would have 10 calendar days to request a due process hearing to invoke stay put or to continue, not to invoke, to continue the stay put placement. Um, so that that's important for many people when there is a disagreement in placement. Okay, so the benefits of mediation. Well, obviously, there's lots of benefits of mediation, but one of the big benefits is lower financial and emotional costs compared to due process. Obviously, with due process, that is a much more legal process and is much more time consuming as well as more costly because typically both parties have an attorney involved in that process. It provides participants with an opportunity to increase their understanding of their unique situation and explore a mutually acceptable resolution. This is what I really like about mediation is oftentimes it allows us to get a little bit more creative. All of a sudden, when both parties have time to really hear each other out and hear where you're coming from on both sides, it allows for a little bit more brainstorming, a little bit more creativity, um, and coming up with something that both parties feel comfortable with doing. Often results in written agreements where parties have an increased commitment to and ownership of the resolution. This is great because just like with an IEP, when you're writing it and you're able to take on more responsibility, more understanding of what's going to be going on, the same thing happens if you have a written agreement because now you both have committed to whatever you've agreed to, and you both have a little bit more. Um, what do I want to say? You both have a little bit more ownership in that because of making that commitment. It enables parties to have more control over the process and decision making. Like I said earlier, if you ended up going the complaint route or due process route, now you don't really have a lot of control in the decision making process because now either the complaint investigator, if they determine there's been a violation, they're the ones who write the corrective action. The hearing officer in a due process would determine what needs to happen next. And really now the party, it's just left up to those individuals, and the parties no longer really have a lot of say in what that's going to look like. Um, Mediation focuses on developing a plan for the future. Mediation discussions are confidential and cannot be used in due process hearing or civil lawsuit. And, I get this question a lot about confidentiality. So, mediation discussions are confidential and the mediation agreement is confidential. However, if there is something in the agreement that a member of the IEP team needs to be aware of to be able to follow the agreement, then obviously the district is going to need to make that person aware of what their role is. They don't have to make the IEP team aware of the whole agreement, but just the portion that they would be responsible for doing. And often it is helpful in resolving issues that are subject to state complaints or due process complaints. So oftentimes, many people may start with a state complaint or a due process and then agree to mediate after the fact. And the mediation will then resolve the issue. So then the complaint can get withdrawn or the due process can get withdrawn, and it makes things happen a lot faster with mediation. Typically, when someone makes a request for mediation, we hope that it gets scheduled within 2 to 3 weeks. From when it was requested. That doesn't always happen because it's dependent upon everyone's schedules. However, that's what the goal for that would be, which is much faster than a complaint, which may take 60 days. Well, will take 60 days for a letter of finding, and a due process could take 75 days or longer. And that's it. All right, I already made it to my questions. So
Good
I'll go ahead and
deal.
open it up.
Yeah, we've got lots of them. So I did
Awesome.
answer one because I knew the answer. So they asked if who would facilitate. So who are these IEP facilitators?
Yeah.
So I kind of just put a short description in there, but if you'd like to go into that further.
Yeah, so we actually have, let me count, five. So we have 10 IEP facilitators currently that work for us. We have, they're located all over the state, but the majority of them do come from Northern Illinois. Many of our IEP facilitators are either retired administrators, school administrators. Some are parents of students with disabilities, and some are just advocates, and they also work as facilitators. So we have a variety. Oftentimes the way they're assigned is based upon where the meeting's being held. If the meeting is a virtual meeting, then I don't utilize that. But if I'm assuming most of the time IEP meetings are now in person. So typically we'll go by where it's located and who's available to attend.
Perfect. I'm going to jump around a little bit in some of the
Sure.
questions that are on here. So,
Mhm.
and before I forget, I'm going to stop the recording. I wanted that one to be part of the part there because
Sure.
it was a very good question to have. So, at this point, I'm going to stop the recording of our presentation today. I will still continue to read through questions. So,
Mhm.